The wonderful thing about lost media is that, while it is technically considered lost, that doesn't necessarily mean it's gone for good. As with things such as old kids shows from the 1980s and 1990s, early episodes of Doctor Who, The Morecambe and Wise Show, and even an old television special that aired once you can barely remember, they always find ways to make themselves public again with time, patience, and contributions from individuals inquisitive enough to look through things and see what they can find and bring to the surface. Some media, however, has no chance of recovery, and a lot of it is sadly forgotten by time itself. This is a select few pieces of lost media that will most likely never be recovered. United. United was a soap opera that was broadcast twice weekly on BBC One from the 4th of October 1965 to the 2nd of March 1967. The series followed the fortunes of a fictional second division football team, Brentwich United. The football scenes were filmed on the grounds of Stoke City with Jimmy Hill acting as a technical advisor, and the efforts to achieve authenticity saw the show being criticised by the then management of Wolverhampton Wanderers, who complained that the series was based on their team. Created by Anthony Cornish, other writers on the programme included Jerry Davis, Brian Hales, Malcolm Hulke, and John Lucarotti. The directors included Innes Lloyd and Derek Martinus. Aside from Cornish, all of these individuals also worked on Doctor Who, concurrent with their involvement in United. Another Doctor Who connection was Derek Sherwin, who featured briefly as a fiery Welsh striker, and went on to write and produce extensively for the sci-fi series. United was, unfortunately, not a success, and was cancelled after 2 seasons. The programme was generally considered to be too soft to appeal to male viewers and too male-oriented for the female soap opera audience. As a result, the BBC wiped the master tapes for every single episode from their archives. Today, despite a constant effort to find other lost media the BBC has wiped over the years, no episodes of United have been discovered, and the entire 147 episode series is still missing. This could perhaps be attributed to the fact that the BBC seems to not have distributed any of the series to any other country, which it normally did with other shows that have been found over the years. The show just didn't have much overseas appeal given its inherently British nature. If this is the case, it is unlikely the public will ever see any of United ever again, making it permanently lost. Doctor Who. Destroyed without copies. Doctor Who needs no introduction. It's a science fiction television series that's been going on for almost 60 years about an alien time travelling in a blue police box, with a huge interior, with said traveller changing his face and personality after death, usually travelling with companions and fighting aliens, such as Daleks, Cybermen and Zygons. Most significantly, the 1960s black and white era of Doctor Who is the only one to remain affected by the BBC's junking wiping policy. While the Jon Pertwee colour era was affected by wiping and junking, all third Doctor episodes now exist in some format, with black and white telerecording copies or videotape copies with weak colour being restored and fully recolorized to match the original broadcast format as accurately and technologically possible. William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton are the only Doctors to be affected by missing episodes and incomplete stories in a long-lasting way, with not one single season in their name known to fully exist since their original broadcasts. The highest number of missing episodes is 33 out of 43 for Season 4, and the least is 2 episodes out of 39 for Season 2. It's for this reason that Season 2 was the first black and white era season to be released on the collection Blu-ray range. Despite the active search across the globe, and with private collectors for film copies of the missing episodes continuing to this day, one episode of Doctor Who is thought to be irretrievably lost. That being Episode 7, The Feast of Stephen, of the 12-part epic The Daleks' Master Plan. Or is it? Episode 7 was set to be broadcast on the 25th of December 1965, Christmas Day, and the BBC and the production team seemed to agree that a grim Dalek tale would be too much for Saturday night TV on such a day, so the episode was written specifically to avoid the main conflict of the story. The Feast of Stephen is a comical episode, taking place at a police station and on a Hollywood set, with the First Doctor, Stephen and Sarah getting involved in various hijinks as they attempt to make their way back to the TARDIS following their unintentional diversions into trouble. To say the least, it's very tonally inconsistent with the main story. When the Daleks' master plan was offered for overseas sale, it was sold as an 11-part story, which was possible given how Episode 7 stood on its own, separate from the arc of the titular master plan. Despite insistence the episode was never copied, a telerecording of The Feast of Stephen was apparently made on the 3rd of December 1965, listed in the existing production notes as telerecording 23-1-5-8196, but never made available for overseas sales, as its transmission would have to coincide with Christmas, and overseas television stations would be screening the story at any time of year. Not one frame of footage exists for the episode, but it's the only episode to have pictures taken from a TV screen by Robert Jewell, who appeared in the episode and watched it on its one and only broadcast on television. These off-air photographs should not be confused with John Cura's telesnaps, a name given only to his services exclusively. Fortunately, episodes 2, 5 and 10 still exist from this story. They're not bad by any means, but they're hardly the most exciting episodes. While I don't think The Feast of Stephen is a great episode, and could have been left unmade entirely, and the story overall has some padding issues, I think it's a shame that any episode of Doctor Who, no matter how good or poor in writing or production quality, is missing, especially my personal favourite from this serial, episode 12, which features one of the bleakest, coldest conclusions to a classic serial I've ever witnessed, especially for the 1960s era. Night of Giants is another odd example, having originally recorded 4 episodes. Directed by Douglas Camfield and entitled The Urge to Live, Episode 4 was spliced together with Episode 3, Crisis, to create a faster-paced climax. This decision, made by then head of drama Sidney Newman, resulted in a gap at the end of the second production block and the creation of Mission to the Unknown. The unused portions of Episode 3 and 4 are believed to have been destroyed, and will never be seen again. Most interestingly, a reconstruction of the erased episode content, created by Ian Levine, is available on the DVD as an extra. Most interestingly, a deleted scene from the 1968 Second Doctor serial The Invasion is also gone forever due to the circumstances surrounding its deletion from the episode. The scene featured the original fate of the character Rutledge being forced into shooting himself by Vaughan. It was filmed, but cut before broadcast, presumably for being too dark, and it is now lost for good. Some other fragments, such as a lost scene from the Ark in Space where Noah begs Vera to kill him, and the original line delivered by Colin Baker at the end of Revelation of the Daleks, where he says blackball instead of the screen freezing, are thought to be lost forever, as they were erased from the master tapes and never intended to be broadcast. The only reason the controversial drowning cliffhanger from The Deadly Assassin still exists is because it was actually broadcast and able to be salvaged from a domestic videotape created by a fan. Any number of Doctor Who episodes could be irretrievably lost, as the most likely explanation for the episodes existing with private collectors is because they were salvaged after being spaghettified and thrown out. This doesn't mean every junked episode that wasn't first-hand destroyed or critically damaged first survived their initial loss, but some of them did. Galaxy 4 Episode 3 and The Underwater Menace Episode 2 luckily survived, as did The Faceless Ones Episode 3 and The Evil of the Daleks Episode 2. The missing 27 seconds of action and credits from the Galaxy 4 print most likely stems from the spaghettified process before it was thrown out, but could also be a cut made by international broadcast. This 27 seconds is most likely permanently missing as well. If episodes 5 and 10 of Master Plan, found in a Mormon church in 1983, were the original BBC film copies, that means those two also survived their officially documented 1976 junking, like The Underwater Menace, with no damage. But they could be the Australian prints, returned after rejection and junked, only to be salvaged, or simply left in a crate that somehow wound up in the church. The Power of the Daleks, junked in 1975, just as easily could have survived its return from Australia and subsequent junking that same year thanks to any number of private collectors. Singapore definitely doesn't have it, but we have to be patient and accept the fact that some might be permanently lost. The Television Ghost. The Television Ghost was a very early television program broadcast on W2XAB New York City, an experimental branch of the Columbian Broadcasting System and predecessor of the current WCBS TV affiliate. It was broadcast in the early 1930s, premiering on August 17, 1931. It is often considered to be the first dramatic television anthology ever made. The show centered on the idea of ghosts telling the stories of how they were murdered. Each episode featured a different story, but the ghost was always played by George Kelting, whose costume involved having his face painted white and a sheet wrapped around him. Due to the technical limitations of the time, the format was closer to that of a radio show, as the video footage only consisted of a continuous shot of Kelting's head and shoulders as he talked. Each broadcast lasted 15 minutes, and the series ran for 2 years until it ended in 1933. Presumably at the same time, W2XAB stations were suspended due to economic turmoil from the Great Depression. Given the early nature of television technology, the series had to be broadcasted live, and was not able to be recorded by the network. In addition, the few people who even owned a television receiver at the time found that the screen was so dim it was barely visible to the naked eye, let alone a film recording. The series was also broadcast via radio on W2XE New York City and WABC New York, but no audio recordings have surfaced either, as this was also before radio broadcasts started being regularly preserved. The only elements of the series that exist are a single photograph and a couple of newspaper mentions from the time. Because of this, no footage is thought to have survived. With no chance of it ever resurfacing, the series is unanimously considered to be permanently lost. The Steve Irwin death tape. The controversial death of Steve Irwin was a tragic incident where the famed crocodile hunter succumbed to an injury no one was expecting, that of a stingray barb to the chest. Irwin made it clear to his crew that no matter what happened, even if the injury is fatal, they continue recording for the sake of their wildlife documentation. This was a rule of his that his crew never broke, even during production on Ocean's Deadliest. According to eyewitness testimonies from crew members, the stingray, which Irwin was attempting to swim over the top of, struck Irwin in the chest multiple times, puncturing his heart, after which point he was immediately pulled from the water by his colleagues onto Croc 1, a 75-foot yacht created for the purposes of conducting both research and adventure tours. The Croc 1 attempted to rush to the shore as Irwin bled out. An hour had passed before they made it to land, during which time Irwin's colleague, and the man who was behind the camera when Irwin was attacked, Justin Lyons, performed CPR on him, all while a second cameraman continued shooting the footage from the sidelines. Irwin was pronounced dead by paramedics within seconds of their arrival. According to Lyons, his final words were, "I'm dying." The resulting footage was handed over to the Queensland authorities, who are said to have eventually returned it to Irwin's family, who are in turn said to have destroyed it. Lyons gave a 15-minute tell-all years after the incident, disclosing all details about the attack and the following CPR incident where Irwin gave his last words. When asked about his feelings on the possibility of the footage one day being shown, he stated that he hopes it is never released, out of respect for Irwin's family, also revealing that he is no longer in possession of the recordings, presumably having also destroyed it, and that he suspects that there are no remaining copies in existence. Irwin's death will never be shown, and that's probably for the best. Apollo 11 moon landing. Original SSTV tapes. On July the 20th, 1969, the Apollo 11 landing capsule with its crew of 2 astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, touched down on the moon. The footage has become world famous and will hopefully be preserved for the entire future of human history as one of the most significant achievements of the species. Therefore, it is strange, and not generally known by the public, that NASA lost their original SSTV tapes of the event. The journey and landing of Apollo 11 was filmed by the astronauts that went on the mission, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Michael Collins. For scientific purposes, the experience was recorded on a high-quality 16mm Super 8 camera that covered the moonwalk from the window of the lunar module. For live pictures to a general audience, the signal from the television camera on the surface was broadcast live back to Earth, along with other mission data via a signal encoding known as SSTV. SSTV allows for an image to be embedded into audio data and transmitted as a radio signal. This SSTV signal was picked up on multiple telescopes on Earth, one in Goldstone, California, the other one in Parkes, Australia. Additionally, Australia provided a tracking station in Honeysuckle Creek at the telescope's facilities, with all data telemetry and SSTV images was cloned into 2 branches. One branch of the signal went straight to a backup tape recorder capable of storing the incoming information at the telescope facility, while the other branch immediately proceeded to signal and decode SSTV images that were designated to be shown to the public. However, as the data coming from the astronauts' cameras was incompatible with TV image broadcasting standards, namely NTSC, a conversion had to take place. Curiously, this occurred in one of the most primitive ways imaginable. The signal was fed to a high-quality screen, capable of displaying images from the astronauts' cameras. The light emissions from the screen were recorded by a camera, putting out image data compatible with contemporary television sets. The now TV-friendly signal then sent from Australia via satellite to Goldstone, California, and from there via microwave transmission to the Mission Control Center. It was then only that an image signal arrived at the Mission Control Center in Houston. Here, the signal was distributed further to TV stations. However, the only video from the moon landing broadcast that day was in severely worse quality than what a few technicians would have witnessed at the ground station before any crude conversion took place, said to be an extremely high image quality that left them quite surprised at what they were witnessing. In recent years, interest in the original SSTV data recorded at tracking stations Goldstone, Honeysuckle Creek, and Parks has risen. After extensive search, no copies of the original image signal, along with mission data, has shown up. According to NASA, it is very likely that the tapes were, with or without authorization, wiped for reuse. The loss of the Apollo 11 footage has fueled conspiracy theories claiming that the moon landings were an elaborate hoax and that the footage was filmed in a studio. On subsequent missions of Apollos 12 through 17, NASA improved quality, and as cameras produced NTSC standard signals, there was no need for conversion. Footage from the subsequent missions have been successfully retained by NASA, and as such are available in much higher quality than the Apollo 11 footage. This fact should put to rest any claims that NASA conveniently lost the footage to prevent close analysis of the film, as subsequent landing footage is available for analysis of high quality. Regardless, the original footage of Apollo 11's moon landing is permanently lost. Smosh the movie, R-rated cut. Smosh is considered to be something of an internet classic. It was two friends making silly videos that became hugely popular because of the random humour and outlandish concepts. While the original creators have since disbanded and the channel itself has become a corporate product, they actually made a movie. The film starred Smosh's founders, Ian Hecox and Anthony Padilla. Upon release, the film was critically panned due to Smosh having little input on the filmmaking process and an amount of lowbrow humour. However, what many do not know is that the final version of the film was not the rendition that Anthony Padilla and Ian Hecox had initially imagined. The film was written by someone else with their minimum input and was originally given an R rating by the MPAA due to the heavy amount of sexual and foul-mouthed content that exceeded the standards of what the MPAA would deem suitable for the PG-13 rating. Studies have shown that out of all the American film ratings, PG-13 performs the best. Ian, Anthony, and the studio were stricken and, in a panic, re-edited the film, making it a watered-down version of what it originally was, which was more of something the two wanted to make. The existence of this cut was first brought to light on the Cold Ones episode Ian from Smosh Starts Food Battle 2020, where a joke about the movie being awful by co-host Max Mofo led Anthony to discussing the R-rated cut's existence, and the reasons for it not being released. Similar to the Scooby-Doo movie, it was yet another example of random idiots, intelligent, well-selected people interpreting something in an unfair way, and the studio giving in to their utterly ridiculous opinions. Reasonable opinions. When the possibility of seeing it came up, Anthony said that the cut doesn't exist.
Why? Okay, I kind of want to watch the R-rated Smosh movie.
Well, you can't. It doesn't exist.
Where's that original cut center?
I wish I could tell you, but it doesn't exist.
It's gone. It got purged.
Given the film's negative reputation, Anthony's comments, and the fact that Smosh is practically dead, it is most likely a permanently lost cut. Assault Human. Assault Human was a 1972 tokusatsu series that ran for 13 episodes. The plot was as follows. King Flasher, a mysterious being, and his army of Flashers threaten the safety of Earth, starting by targeting children. Meanwhile, Junichiro Iwaki, a once famous gymnastics coach, resigns from his job to train the threatened children. In return, the children use a device known as Human Sign to transform Junichiro into a superhero named the Human. From then on, King Flasher began creating monsters to attack the children, but Junichiro was always there to stop them. Later on, Junichiro's brother Junjiro started becoming suspicious of his brother's frequent disappearances. This leads to Junjiro finding out about Junichiro's alter ego. At the same time, King Flasher was overthrown by another evil being called Grand Flasher, who nearly killed Junichiro. But the children's spectators used a secondary type of human sign to turn Junjiro into the second human. Gradually, the human brothers managed to destroy every last member of the Flasher Corps, including Grand Flasher himself, restoring peace to the world. Pretty interesting, albeit far-fetched stuff. All episode titles, the cast, and the crew are well documented and publicly known, but the series hasn't been seen in decades. The show was rerun once in the 1980s, but hasn't been rebroadcast a second time or released on home media since this rerun. It is believed that because the show was shot on video instead of film, something considered to be a bit more unusual in Japan, Nippon TV wiped and reused the master tapes. Toho and Nippon took archiving a bit more seriously than most broadcasters, so the reuse may have been completely accidental. The only traces of Assault Human come in the form of supplementary materials such as reference books, merchandise, magazine articles, and the show's soundtrack. In addition, a fragment of footage roughly 1 minute long was uncovered in the mid-2010s, having been transferred from a Betamax tape. The exact circumstances of this recovery, be it a pre-broadcast beta tape or a domestic recording, are unclear. The show was actually filmed live as a stage show, utilising many innovative techniques such as smoke, stage lighting, and special effects. Artist and production designer Tal Narita handcrafted a bronze statuette of Human No. 1 in 1987 in commemoration of the series, alongside statues of Ultraman and Ultra 7, which were collectively referred to as his Trinity. The original is currently held in a personal collection. However, 40 copies of it were created and made available for sale in 2016. Following the show's conclusion, ownership of the suits fell to Bin Promotion, who had handled suit acting and stunts during the series' original run. While suits from the show were reused by Toho in Go Godman and Go Green Man, the company continued to put on live performances in subsequent years. Amateur 8mm recordings from both shows were discovered sometime before 2010 and included in the documentary This Was Sendai Miyagi. It is considered to be most likely permanently lost. An Inspector Calls, 1948 teleplay. An Inspector Calls is a drama play written by British playwright and dramatist J.B. Priestley in 1945, and something I studied during my GCSEs. It was a lot of fun. The play is a compact story of the upper-class Burling family in the fictional town of Brumley in 1912. The family celebrates the engagement of daughter Sheila to Gerald Croft, a family friend and son of father Arthur Burling's business rival. The evening is disrupted by the arrival of Inspector Ghoul, a strange, ironically ghoulish figure, who begins to interview the family individually on the grounds that they may have been somehow related to the death of a young girl by the name of Eva Smith, who has multiple alter egos. The play expands on the ideas of socialism versus capitalism, leaning in favour of the former according to Priestley's views, and it even has some light satire on pre-World War I predictions and the fate of the Titanic. Some adaptations, like the 2015 one, have been made by the BBC, yet their 1948 televised production is completely overlooked and lost. Running at 105 minutes, nothing of the actual production is available to the public, except for a single still image and a television listing from Radio Times, issue 1281. The performance starred George Hayes as the titular Inspector Ghoul, Alastair Bannerman as George Croft, Julian Mitchell as Mr. Arthur Burling, Mary Maryland as Mrs. Sybil Burling, Joy Shelton as Sheila Burling, and Derek Blomfield as Eric Burling, and the play would have aired on the 4th of May at 8:30 p.m. It was apparently performed again with the same cast 3 days later, although the details on this second performance are also largely elusive. While the telerecording process was created as early as 1947, the BBC deemed the quality of film copies as unacceptable, and only used it semi-regularly for one-off plays until as early as 1953, when it started to be used more commonly as a preservation method. This means it's extremely unlikely the live broadcast was ever even recorded. The Radio Times article detailing the play does not mention anything specific about the production itself, mainly focusing on the story with a cast listing and showtime. The play and its repeat will most likely never be salvaged, making them permanently lost.